I think God has blessed me, one, with great parents, great luck not to have been born affluent.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're not born affluent, you're either going to fall into despair or you're going to fight through it.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, that wasn't really an option for me because I don't like going hungry. So I had to fight through it.
So so what you described is the two amazing blessings in life, right? Number one, born with great parents, and then secondly, the parents that allow you to establish your own grit by failing and by being in tough situations you got to get yourself out of with their support and love, right? But not money and not things. And I think that's such a huge point that the most successful people I know are people like you, people that have gone through tough times. They've learned a lot of lessons, and they look with gratitude on the fact that they had to establish this grit to be stronger in life. And too often I believe people think that success like you've had in your life and many of our friends have had, it's because they had it handed to them. Well, that's not sustainable success, in my opinion. If you've had anything handed to you, you're not usually going to be the leader that's able to be looked upon with great experiences and losses, right? To go on and lead. So again, I love where you've come from, and I want to meet your dad and mom someday, buddy.
Sure, they're great people.
I'd love to meet them because I could have fun conversations with them for sure. So yeah, so good. So sorry about that. I had to break in because it's just those two things. People don't. Not everybody looks at those two things as great blessings that they are. And boy, we got to have gratitude if we have those two things: loving parents that don't let you be the victim, and then the gratitude that you've been taught to have for the tough situations you've had to get through yourself too. Right? That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so now I'm back to I got to take over this company I'm working with, and we start Blackwell Consulting together. 3 years in, I tell my father I want to sell my half of the company to him
Mm-hmm.
because my father grew up in a world of IBM, that kind of world. My world wasn't that. I had what I call I don't call the strange people, but the different people.
Mm-hmm.
People from different countries, people that IBM wasn't going to hire. But these are the people that I believe in because all my friends ended up being kind of foreign.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in junior high school and high school, there were always some people from some other country. They were immigrants. Their families were immigrants.
Sure.
When I was studying martial arts, all my friends ended up being Korean
Mm-hmm.
because there was a Korean martial arts, and they were immigrants as well. I remember when I would have discussions when I was young about with my Korean friends about because I saw the world as black and white. That's the way the world was. Mm-hmm. White people are mean, and they did all this stuff to us. And he'd say, no, it's not them. It's the Japanese. The Japanese are the evil people in the world because they did all this stuff to us. And then later I have friends that were from Serbia, and they say, no. It's the Catholics. And I'm thinking, wait, aren't you guys the same skin color?
Sure.
So I really had to rethink this thing. Obviously, later it's kind of just tribalism.
Sure.
And then later I realized that anybody that gets their pride from their ethnicity is not much of a person. Mm. If what you have to be proud of is the fact that you're black or that you're white or that you're something,
yeah,
you're a pretty shallow person. Because listen, Martin Luther King was a great man. Yes. I had zero to do with it.
Yes.
I don't get credit for that. Now, in the case of blacks in this country, it is important to say you have nothing to be ashamed of. There are people who've done great things, and you should be proud of that. The same kind of reason why I would say Italian Americans. I remember like talking to some Italian Americans about like The Godfather.
Yeah.
The Godfather, oh, that's a really cool movie. But they hated it. And the reason why is because it portrays the criminal element in our community as heroes. That's what it does.
Sure.
And I'm saying, that's kind of like us. Because every nightmare, I reveal the nightmare of Black people when they watch TV. You listen to the news and they say something bad happened. Somebody did something really bad to some other people.
Yeah.
And if you're Black, at least in my generation, my parents' generation, it's like, please don't let him be Black.
Yeah.
They're going to come out with some crazy looking stuff in their head. They're not going to be able to talk. And it's like, oh my God, please. So anyway, I got an appreciation. Luckily, that's another thing that I think I got lucky is being born in this country. Even though we have a history that has been unkind to Blacks. There was a different set of rules for Blacks. And why most people think that in the civil rights era and things like that, it was government to the rescue. I say it wasn't government to the rescue. It was government that caused the problem in the first place. If the government, which to me is a proper role of government, had protected everybody equally, if there was equal protection under the law, there would have been no Jim Crow laws. There would have been no lynching. It was a failure of government that caused those problems. So anyway, I sell my father, I have the company because I just didn't like getting in arguments with my father over business. Said, this is my father. I'm supposed to respect my father, but I don't agree with him. The math is not working for me. So therefore, I said, I have to leave because that's too much for me.
This was the mid 90s, end of 90s?
This was 95. I sold him my half of the company. So it's 95. I sell my half of the company. About that time, I'm 34. It's about the time people starting to think about having families and stuff. I got a girlfriend. I decide I'm gonna buy a house. So somebody told me to look over in the area called North Kenwood, which was by Hyde Park. They said, I think this is going to be a hot area. So that area, which was the last piece of undeveloped land that was near the lake between Hyde Park, between 35th Street on the north and 47th Street on the south.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is never going to last. So I remember that I grew up, even though my family wasn't affluent by any means. I lived in an economically integrated Black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents did, both in Philadelphia and in Louisville, Kentucky. And they were safe neighborhoods. My parents had no problems us walking out. There was not a lot of drama. They were not free of drama, but it was kind of shielded, let's say. And so I remembered growing up, two things. Growing up, feeling safe, even though I didn't have any money, to going a place where I didn't feel safe, even though my parents ended up being more affluent. And through my time, I had suffered what I call the perception of incompetence. So I remember I was later when I was trading us on the floor with a Merc, and the guy gave me a compliment. He said, you're really smart, you're honest. You got a lot of white qualities. He says you're smart, honest, you work hard, you got a lot of white qualities.
Oh man.
So I said, whatever. But I remember that, and there was a lot of Black people that I thought that were part of the desegregation generation that had to endure forced busing and being the first, or their parents were the first, and it was not fun. So, in fact, I kind of survived, I would say. My parents forced me to go to church when I was in high school, something I had no interest in at all. But they found a little Black neighborhood in Wheaton. In the center of that community was a church. It's called Second Baptist Church. So my parents made me go to church. And it turned out it was the smartest thing that ever happened. Because now I had people that I felt like I could relate to. I could talk to. So there was this little community of Black families that were all good people, except for one or two. And a lot of those people, I'd say, became my friends. And I think in some ways it saved me because I didn't have those relationships. And the other thing, I felt like I was in a foreign land, frankly, when I moved first to Illinois. So I do this, I sell my company, and then I'm thinking there are other people like me who remember when our neighborhoods used to be better. In fact, there is no Black neighborhood today as well off as it was in 1967.
In today's dollars, is that
no, not in today's dollars. I'm not talking about incomes.
okay?
I'm talking about the conditions of the community.
Yeah.
There's not one Black neighborhood that's as well off today, that's as safe, that is, I would just say, is not as well off as it was in 1967.
Yeah. In all aspects, family, faith, security, all these things.
Well, there's a number of different things. A number of different things have happened in these periods. The periods of the 1940s to 1960s, and then the 1960s onward. I think it is too much government. It created incentives, or at least non-disincentives, for people not to have babies out of wedlock. So you have lots of fatherlessness, children. And listen, it doesn't matter whether you're white, Black, or from the moon. I think God made men and women. They're equal but different, and there's a reason why we have families.
Yes.
And people without families have real problems.
Absolutely.
So that is a phenomenon, frankly. It's global, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, I said I want to make an economically integrated Black neighborhood. So no government money, just an economically integrated Black neighborhood. So I think there are people who are about my age who are part of the desegregation generation, that if you could convince them to come and move, that this was a transitional neighborhood, they had these inner feelings the same way that I did. They wanted their own safe places, because you still have to deal in a world where you go to work and you know there's this perception of incompetence. You always have to prove you're not a moron if you're Black. That is something that is still the case today. So, turns out, now everybody else thought we needed a racially integrated neighborhood. What we need to do is to make it attractive for whites to come into the neighborhood, and things would get better. And I really disagreed with that, because I said, if you've got to be able to look at people as equals, you cannot be begging people all the time and expect that they're going to look at you like an adult. Take care of yourself. I'd say, guys, be a man. Take care of yourself, and then people will look across at you as an equal. But nobody can look at you as an equal when you're begging them for money. So that was my view. Another thing I got from my parents, I would say. So it turns out, so I built the first high-end. I started a company called Urban Fishing Development. And I started getting calls about charters on Lake Michigan. But it was all about giving, the whole saying, if you give a man a fish.
Yep. You can eat for a day.
So I said, if we did that, we created a neighborhood that tied to people's aspirations. So I built the first high-end homes, and I named them after famous black people in history. I put the headstones: Paul Robeson, Lewis Latimer, Benjamin Banneker, and George Washington Carver.
Yes.
People like that. People that I thought had real character.
Mm-hmm.
And I was right. In fact, I remember I went to was talking to the bank about this, and two things. They said, black people are not going to buy expensive homes. That's what they told me. Said, okay. So I just had to take my own money. And I did it. So I made a really big bet. Bought a bunch of land. At the time, the land was $2 a foot versus being in Hyde Park, which is $60 a foot and $100 a foot in Lincoln Park.
Sure.
So if you can add, there's not a lot lower to go.
Sure.
So I built the first high-end homes there. They sold. I did that. And then about 2 years later, I got out of it because I just hated construction. I hated people coming up and saying, what's your union participation and all this other stuff. Listen, God bless them, but I wanted to prove that actually black people could do things, and they weren't exactly getting a lot of love from the trade union.
How many homes did you build?
8. 8. So what happened was I got out of it, and it kind of set their trajectory. And today, even, it is still what I had envisioned. It's an economically integrated black neighborhood, and everything has changed. If you go back to '94, when I bought that house, there was glass everywhere. Martin Luther King High School was the worst school in the state. Lots and lots and lots of drama. Now, there were other things as well. I mean, they tore down some public housing, things like that. But it became an area where I think people thought that they could invest. It became a lot more economically integrated, and I thought then everybody benefited from that. So then I got out of that. I started EKI Digital in 1998. While I was at Blackwell Consulting, I had written a model for a company that was based on electronic knowledge interchange. At the time, there was electronic data interchange.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a model for a company around electronic knowledge interchange. So that's actually the name of the company. It's called Electronic Knowledge Interchange. And when I started the company, I said the company is going to be three main things we're going to do. Because I started with a friend of mine. I said, one is we're never going to lay anybody off. Because as soon as we do that, we're going to lose trust. So we're going to be prudent, we're going to save our money, and we're never going to lay anybody off. The second is, I said, we're going to be the place where the most talented people in our profession want to work, regardless of where they're from. Because I remember when I was in IBM and they just told me you don't fit in. It was a kind of a nice way of them saying, you kind of don't fit in. And the things that I'd learned from my father. So it doesn't matter if you have an accent, whether you're a woman, whether you're anything. All that matters is what you produce. That's how we're going to judge people, is based on what they produce. And we were going to be a trusted partner to our customers. We were never going to lie to our customers. We were never going to do things that were in our short-term interest that we would regret later. Then we started the company did really well. And then in 2000, I was looking at the stock market, and I was actually a trader in '87 during the big crash in 1987. Mm-hmm. In fact, I had written a model, and I knew the day it was going to have a major crash. It was funny. It happened the exact day. So, but I did something stupid. I could figure out in the options markets, the out of the money options. There, I was what's called a gamma trader. Well, I don't want to bore you with too much math, but in trade, gamma is the delta of the delta. It's the acceleration of price changes. So I knew that out of the money options, if traders would sell, they would sell them, means they were collecting money.
Mm-hmm.
But if the market went down fast, they would panic, it would blow up the prices, and they would have to sell.
Sure.
So that's how I ate.
Huh.
It was just kind of math and human psychology.
Did you know a guy named Tony Saliba back then?
What's his name?
Tony Saliba.
God, it sounds really familiar.
Listen to our podcast from, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Tony Saliba is a friend of mine and did really well and created some algorithms that people invested in his trading methodology and did really, really well. Developed a company and data, housing and all that sold eventually for a big chunk of dough. And he's built another business today that's even bigger. But he was looked upon as like the favorite child on the Chicago floor trading back in the late 80s, early 90s, I think it was. But yeah, look him up when you get a chance. But listen to his thing. He's an awesome guy. He lives in Chicago. You'd like him a lot. You got a lot of similar values.
I'll definitely do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's 2000. I think the stock market's going to go bad. And I started talking to our people, and this was before the crash, the dot-com crash. And I was telling our people the importance of making money. And they would say, why are you always talking about making money? And I said, because companies that don't make money do bad things to their people. And you're going to find out pretty soon. So it was early 2000. I said, this is in bad shape. So I got out of all the stocks and everything. And that year, Chicago had something called the Ping Pong Festival. So I decided we were going to sponsor the Ping Pong Festival. Now, the only thing I knew about table tennis at the time was I liked it, and I played it with my father. Those are the memories, frankly, that I say the memories I have of my father when he wasn't yelling at me for doing some stupid teenage thing or pissing off my mother, which I had a habit of doing unintentionally. But I remember my mother, I always tell people, when I grew up, I played table tennis with my father. Those are the memories I have of us together, and they meant a lot to me. And then later he told me, he said, that's not, let me tell you what really happened. So my father's 23 years older than me. I'm a teenager, so he's right in his, what would that be, 30s. And my father worked like a pig. So my mother said to him, I know you're busy and you're focused on your career, but don't forget you have a son. So don't be a bum and spend time with your son.
Yeah.
That's when he went and bought a table tennis table. Again, I think reacting to my mother. And so
It's funny you say that because my dad and I played ping pong together until I could beat him consistently. Then he stopped playing against me. It was a long time, for a few years I had to play him before I got to beating him, and then he stopped playing with me. But same with my sons. My oldest son, 32, Austin, him and I played a lot of table tennis. My son now, Nikita, he's just turned 19. Same way, we played ping pong together. It's been a lot of our time together. So how many families, as I'm sure you found out, many families, around the ping pong table, a lot of bonding goes on, right?
Yeah,
cool.
So,
Absolutely.
anyway, I sponsor the ping pong festival. They asked me to be the chairman. We spent $100,000 sponsoring that. We were by ourselves then. Nobody else was interested in it, which was okay for me. But we had never done any business in the public sector. So I decided we should actually diversify into the public sector, because I never wanted to. The other thing my father, this is going to be a story about what my father told me. Another thing my father said is about don't be a minority business.
Hmm.
He said, that's the crumbs. It's not serious. So anyway, I started Killer Spin. Killer Spin is going to be the #1 company in the world. Started in late 2001. It's going to be the #1 company in the world in creating beautiful table tennis experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that I say drive me is just being #1 in the world at something. I could be the #1 dog walker in the world, and that would be okay to me. It's more important to me than money. But
Absolutely.
I think that if you can be #1 in the world at something, you won't be broke, no matter what it is.
That's right.
So start Killer Spin, and things are going well. We're the #1 company in our world, in our space. We're creating things that people have never done. And so those are the 2 companies I have today. So now I'm like, as I think about my life going forward, my view is that, and especially if you're Black, there are people who went through some real crap
Mm-hmm.
to give me the opportunity that I have today. My grandfather was actually the first Black person admitted to the University of Pennsylvania, but he couldn't go. He tested in, and this would have been in like 1904 or something.
Wow.
He tested in because he was really smart, but his father died and he couldn't get in. He couldn't because his father died. Now, my grandfather worked 3 jobs his whole life, was a janitor, and tutored my father in Latin and geometry. And to think about how many people, what that man could have been.
Yeah. The difference he could have made in the world.
With the talent that he had.
Yeah.
So, and my father was same thing. My father's road was easier than my grandfather's road, who was easier than his father's road, and my road was easier than my father's road. And hopefully the people coming behind me. However, I'm concerned that it's not going to be the case. Now, here's my view around the minority business program. What they were intended to do, why they're important, when and how they should work. There is no doubt that Blacks were prohibited from participating in the free market. There's no doubt that that happened. You couldn't do certain things by law.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in 1965, right, Martin Luther King fought for, right, us to have what I would call one set of rules. When he talked about being judged by your character, not your color,
Mm-hmm.
what he meant was you get judged, everybody should get judged based on who they are, their character, and what they do. You shouldn't be limited because you happen to be
Yes.
Black, anything else. You shouldn't get any special privileges, but you shouldn't have to be in a world
Should be no disadvantages for sure.
where you're a disadvantage, have a disadvantage. And that's clearly the case. So in Martin Luther King, when they got that done, okay, now you got the Voting Rights Act, you got every civil rights legislation, stuff starts to improve. The one thing that doesn't is having money, because nowhere in the world are poor people healthy, educated, and safe. And conversely, nowhere in the world, regardless of their race, are affluent people not healthy, educated, and safe. So this is why, through philanthropy, nobody has ever made a dent in poverty. There's only one case in history that relates to Black people that I know that actually moved the ball forward through philanthropy. And that was a partnership between Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, where they built 5,200 schools. The Black families had to scrape together nickels to contribute. The Black construction capability in the South came out of that partnership because Booker T. Washington was dedicated to Blacks working and have the opportunity to work.
But that's why it worked. It wasn't exclusively philanthropy. It was you had to bring work, right, to the table to be able to make it work. You had that community building it as well, so they had skin in the game, right?
By the way, in the Bible it says it's better to give than to receive. In fact,
Absolutely.
you will receive more as you give. So you do have responsibility.
Absolutely.
And you a moral responsibility to help other people. I don't think the government has a moral responsibility to decide who gets your charity.
Exactly. Exactly.
However, Martin Luther King started to fight for our participation in the economy. So what happened is, right, Martin Luther King gets killed in 1968, cities start to burn. And then I believe that there was a group of business people, mostly white, that saw the threat to the country and said, we need to do better. So they created programs, and then for blacks to get business. And I think that, but over time, what's happened is the definition of a minority went from somebody black, that's what minority used to be,
Mm-hmm.
to everybody who's not a straight white non-veteran male.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everybody ought to benefit from the free market in living in the country. But people go from poverty to prosperity. There's only one track: entrepreneurial-led economic activity. It leads to the appreciation of education and social capital. Social capital is when you reach back and pull some other people along, but more importantly, you create an aspirational roadmap for your young people so they know where to place their bets. That's why the government doesn't have to convince Dominican kids to play baseball,
Yeah,
or black kids to play basketball. The market tells them that's where to place your bet.
absolutely.
So as it comes to minority programs, in my view, the way it should work, for those groups who are poor, I mean, really, you should give opportunity on a voluntary basis, in my view, as it relates to blacks. So I came up with something called the Lead Partner Program. What the Lead Partner Program says is just do business. This system works for everybody. Young people's fascination with Bernie Sanders
That's right.
want to turn us into another country. So the Lead Partner Program says everybody just do business. Do business, and the responsibility of the black company is three. One is to identify a clear value proposition, because if you can't do that, you can't be in business. Two, to rethink the mentor-protege program to make the black companies the mentors and younger companies the proteges.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, take on some what I call community enrichment responsibility. So things we're doing is called mowers and blowers. It's microfinance for cutting grass and moving snow. There's a lot of money there. And then number two, something we call a housing tutoring exchange, where you give honorable black college students a place to live in exchange for mentoring and tutoring elementary and high school kids and seniors. So I believe in the free enterprise system. It is how people go from poverty to prosperity. We ought to try it. And then over time, all this stuff, these artificial things that never work will be eliminated.